Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder All Weather here. This weather pattern continues to remain very active with daily storm chances pretty much every single day. So let's get right to it on the satellite view. Yet we have another convective complex kind of blowing up across the hill country this morning. This same area was the one down there in Sterling City yesterday that did, in fact, report a tornado down there. We also had another tornado that unfolded across Temple, Texas, along with very intense straight line winds. And yes, that is another convective complex is moving towards Brady and the Brownwood area, those areas into Killeen and back into Waco. Yes, there's another convective complex that came out of southeastern Oklahoma. Now it's over Arkansas with their own severe activity this morning. And then we're just kind of getting sporadic rain showers across the Tennessee Valley and into portions of the Northeast this morning. But the main instability for this afternoon is this little activity up here across Wyoming. This is going to continue to move eastbound, interact with the dry line, and set the stage for renewed development later on this afternoon as we bubble up the atmosphere. So if we take a look at the overall lightning indices, yeah, you can kind of see right along that dry line, essentially extending all the way from Texas to North Dakota. We are going to be seeing isolated to scattered supercell thunderstorm development. And along that cool front, along that boundary, we're still going to get some isolated shower activity across the Ohio Valley, back into those areas across the Carolinas and the portions of the Northeast as well. And if we take a look at the breakdown on the latest update from the Storm Prediction Center, it does in fact highlight that slight risk for severe storms really kind of extending all the way down in the north and central Texas, pretty much all the way up to North Dakota, folks. And where you see that orange shaded area, that is an elevated enhanced risk. That's when we could see how another one of these MCSs forming, kind of bowing out these bow segments. And yes, that could lead to more significant winds later on this afternoon, approaching that 65, 75 mile per hour range. And you can't rule out a tornado or two lined up across this region with a 2 and a 5% probability. We saw that yesterday. There was actually only about 3 tornadoes in Texas. So, and we had also a 2 to 5% probability. So you can't rule out a spin up tornado or two within this atmosphere. But the main concern is just a very large hail, the isolated threat of the very large hail today. And of course, not everybody's going to get it. There's likely going to be 30 to 40% coverage where you see that dotted hatch risk from North Texas all the way to North Dakota. But if you're underneath one of those supercells, the atmosphere does have the capability of producing some of those golf ball to likely some ping pong size, maybe even some mixed ends tennis ball size hail, along that boundary, extending from North Texas all the way to the Dakotas. So if you break it down to over the next 24 hours, you can kind of see on the precipitation map where we're talking about that kind of isolated coverage, especially there from North Texas, extending through Oklahoma, through areas of Nebraska, as well as into South Dakota. A little bit higher coverage, that's where we do have that elevated enhanced risk where you could see more scattered to more numerous activity across that region. But further south, that's definitely more isolated to somewhat scattered at times, and then more heavy rain is going to actually push through Montana as well as into North Dakota. And of course, right along this boundary here, you'll just get some sporadic shower activity of a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of activity over those next 24-hour time span. But going into tomorrow, there's the cool front again, right? This cool air just won't actually push through. It kind of teeters back and forth, and now it's going to be elongated across areas of Missouri, back through Arkansas, back into areas of North Texas again, as the dry line gets active. So that's going to make this whole area again into the unstable environment as the warm front pushes well north. You can see where the warm front is all the way in Wisconsin and back into Michigan. So that puts this whole area in play for unstable atmosphere and possibly supercell development. So going into that Friday time frame, yes, we have another renewed risk of a slight risk for severe storms out ahead of that little cool front that's mainly draped across areas of North Texas into Northeast Texas into Arkansas, back into Missouri again, as well as into Illinois and Indiana and areas of Western Kentucky, Western Tennessee. The tornado threat is low going into Friday, but it's not non-zero. But the main threat again would likely be that larger hail down there in North Texas and Northeast Texas there. And you can't roll out some significant winds along that boundary as well of that 60 to 65 mile per hour variety, going into Friday. And that activity favors later on this afternoon, likely after 4 o'clock into the early evening time frame. But then as we head into the weekend, I know a lot of you guys have a lot of plans. It is Memorial Weekend, and it's going to be feeling like Memorial Weekend for those areas across the South, because even we got some record high temperatures to contend with. In fact, right now, the National Weather Service has potentially 9 of them unfolding as the heat really is going to be starting to build from further south. We're talking triple digits there in South Texas, widespread 90s across Texas and much of the Southeast, as well as into Florida, back into Georgia, as well as into South Carolina. But the 80s will continue to surge even further north, getting into Illinois and Indiana, well into Ohio and in Pennsylvania, and really Western New York as well. But the cooler air continues to remain out west, where it's pretty much kind of chilly, really. I mean, some of these highs are in the 60s and 50s, right? And so, but that cold air that's the culprit of keeping this severe weather kind of get going pretty much on a daily basis, because we kind of have a perfect setup. I mean, the heat fuels the thunderstorms, and you've got the south winds pulling in all those elevated dew points, and the soupy air mass would lift further north. So heading into Saturday, yes, we have more instability coming back into play, and it's pretty concerning that these CAPE values, this convective available potential in the energy in the atmosphere, is pushing over 5,000 range. That is plenty of instability as these supercell thunderstorms rise to 60,000 feet cloud tops like we saw yesterday. That's when we could see the bigger hail, right? That 2.5 to 3 inch type variety type hail, very destructive, damaging hail. And you can get some pretty intense winds out of that atmosphere, 70 to 80 miles an hour. Those extend back into North Texas, through Oklahoma, as well as into Kansas, heading into your Saturday time frame. At the same time frame, we've got a pretty intense upper level winds that will be streaking across right there about 70 knots, pulling into that air mass. So you got those updrafts lifting those cloud tops, those ceilings a little bit higher and higher. That produces more room to potentially have a tornado and potentially have the bigger hail that's associated with these supercell thunderstorms, as well as another deepening area of low pressure right now, potentially going down to a 993 low pressure that's highlighted across the panhandle back into western Oklahoma, as well as into Kansas. We've seen this movie before, and we're likely going to see it again on Saturday with yet another increased threat for supercell development. And right now we do have that elevated enhanced risk and a hatched risk for a pretty big area where that instability, where mainly the higher CAPE values would likely unfold right across North Texas into the Red River, much of Oklahoma, and getting into Kansas seems to be the favorite area to see those larger hailstones potentially during the day on Saturday. Again, it looks to be an after 4 o'clock event, 4 o'clock to possibly 10 o'clock. That seems to be the main window of seeing that supercell thunderstorm development. So definitely be on high alert as we go into peak heating heading into your Saturday. But there's the setup. You got a lot of fueling those storms. So you got tons of water vapor coming in from the south, and that just adds, eating into that instability, kind of like what I showed you. So yes, we are looking at supercell development really kind of extending through north and possibly central Texas, but especially as you move further north into Oklahoma and back into a good part of Kansas there, those would be the likely targets for supercell development on Saturday. But going into Sunday, it's all about the heat, right? So we've got a lot of extremes happening on Sunday. Sunday could be a very dynamic day. But again, we have potentially 20 record high temperatures potentially unfolding from the National Weather Service, with more triple digits even approaching beyond 110 degrees, 111 down there in Del Rio, as the 90s was surge back in Florida. and well into Louisiana, with records falling for them as those 80s and 90s try to push even further north. And at the same time, of course, we still have that cooler air coming in from the northwest as well. But this time, now we have that deepening low pressure center now going to be moving across Iowa again, back into Wisconsin, as well as into Illinois. And you got that plenty of fuel to fuel these thunderstorms with the cooler pocket of air aloft. That's going to, again, overturn the atmosphere again. And unfortunately, you're going to have a lot of shear at the surface with the deepening low pressure going to be intensifying as it swings into Wisconsin, with that warm front lifting well almost into Canada. That puts everything underneath into play across Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, back into Kentucky, as well as into Tennessee, as getting into Missouri and moving further south into portions of Arkansas, as well as tapping into those higher elevated dew points. So this is your soupy air mass. This is where likely would be unfolding across those areas into your Sunday time frame. This would be Sunday. This whole area is the warm sector where it'd be surging in out of the Gulf of Mexico, and you got that shear at the lower levels. And yes, the atmosphere will be rotating with that deepening low pressure center nearby. And yes, we are talking about a pretty significant risk for severe storms. And unfortunately, it may even be yet another tornado outbreak unfolding. So right now, the Storm Prediction Center does in fact have that elevated enhanced risk for these areas. This is where the bullseye would likely unfold across a good part of Sunday timeframe, from Arkansas to Missouri, back into portions of Iowa, especially into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, as well as into Tennessee. But this would likely be pushed further north into Wisconsin and back into Michigan as it gets a little bit closer. And if we take a look at the latest tornado parameters, these are just now coming into range from some of these short range models, pushing that instability a little bit further north, right? It's got that rotation, got the higher tornado parameters really elevated, highlighted over Illinois and a good part of Indiana. And I think we go deeper into the day, these actually would likely extend into parts of Wisconsin as well as into Michigan there, going deeper into the day on Sunday. That's exactly what the latest CSU has it as well. The learning guidance has kind of been hinting at a bigger setup. So yes, this could be yet even another moderate risk and a hatched risk for strong tornadoes. And we could be looking at more potentially EF2 type tornadoes, if not greater, with this particular setup on Sunday. Very dynamic setup. And yes, I think those areas across Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, back into Kentucky, as well as into Tennessee, but then feeding further north would be later runs, or extending back into Wisconsin as back into Ohio. Those would be the favorite targets, and then lesser amounts as you further south into Arkansas, on Sunday. But yes, very dynamic setup with this deepening low pressure center highlighted over Wisconsin. I do feel this is going to be pressed further north, so it would include more Wisconsin as well as into Michigan, even into portions of Pennsylvania as we get closer to the event. But this would be the favorite area to have the instability into play during the day on Sunday. And then going into Monday, I don't think it ends there. I think we have more severe storms, not likely as intense, as the low would be winding down by then. But nonetheless, you could still see some stronger thunderstorm development highlighted across areas of the southeast, but heading into those portions of the mid-Atlantic where they actually haven't seen much severe weather over the last couple of weeks. They could be in one of the favored targets for severe storms going into that Monday time frame. But I don't think it really ends there, folks. Going into next week, I know a lot of you guys are probably tired of the storms, but this is a very active time frame, and unfortunately it continues again into next week. So because the latest update puts more instability back into play, as we get beyond Monday, say going into that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday time frame of next week. Yes, we have another renewed surge with the dry line coming in and the surging through the southern and central plains. So I do feel the severe weather aspects would continue well into next week as well. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Make sure to do like this video and definitely hit the subscribe button and catch me next update. Why I protect you before and after storm.